I'm chatting and trying to get letters out of my teeth.
One of our panel members today is Julie Matthew, who has kindly travelled from Sydney. Julie's been teaching for over 20 years, is currently working for the 5 for 5 project for 1 day a week. She also works in a school. She also works at TAFE. So she's does lots of different roles and has an enormous wealth of knowledge. She's also been teaching on the MSL camp this week and last year. We're really pleased to have Julie here, travelled down from Sydney for us. I'm also going to introduce Stephen Capp, who is the principal of Bentley West, so he's my boss, who's here to help give that leadership perspective for any leadership questions that you may have and how we instigate that change. So Steve started his career in primary school, then moved to a secondary college, where they had a lot of students for low level, then came back to Bentley West as principal, and has been quite instrumental in getting a lot of the change. He has also worked on the panel that we're advising on the phonics screening check, so he's got a lot of that knowledge, as does Julie. So if you have questions on that, we can also answer those. And then I think most people know who I am. I'm Sarah Sloan, which Kate should be introducing me as opposed to introducing myself. So I work at Bentley West, but I'm also an educational consultant for the MSL Club. So we've been teaching this morning and organising all of the teachers and making sure that they're teaching the right things and setting the groups up and all that kind of thing as well. I'd started my career in the UK, moved to Singapore and then came here, was a bit shocked with what was going on, and have been obviously working closely with Steve to get change at our school, but also get change elsewhere, so supporting a lot of the dyslexic groups, other schools, and I think that's probably enough information about me. We'll go straight to the questions so we don't run out of time. We've got a few questions and then we'll open it to the floor, so if you've got burning questions, we'll try and answer those too. The first question was, I'm a teacher's aide in a school. What are the 3 most important things I can do to help dyslexic students?
Okay, we thought it was really important I think it's really important to preserve the child's self-esteem. So you need to make sure that they're experiencing success and be their champion. We talked yesterday to parents about having a dyslexia champion, and the difference between children who are successful and not successful is often having one important person in their life who can really be their cheerleader and help them through the difficulties that dyslexia brings. So preserving their self-esteem, but also when you're reading with students, a lot of the we call them SLSOs in New South Wales. What do you call them in Victoria?
Integration aids.
Integration aids or aids. If you're doing a lot of reading with students, make sure that you're not using what we call 3 cueing system. So don't do the guessing, looking at the first sound and guess the rest. It's absolutely disastrous. There is so much more that children can get from understanding the internal workings of a word. That's really important. And making sure that they are reading, segmenting and blending, segmenting the sound, blending all through the word to read it again is really important. So don't do those 3 cueing systems, which I know are endemic in schools. It was taught to me in my undergrad degree that that's what I needed to do, and I've had to unlearn that when it comes to not only teaching children with dyslexia, but just teaching reading in general. It's a strategy that will not see children through to become good, solid readers. So that's probably, and the only other thing I can think of is that we need to do daily drills with students. People often knock a phonic approach because they think that it's drill and kill. A drill is literally something that's really quick, and it helps children to actually get things working to the point of automaticity, where you can say something really, really quickly and you can bring it to your memory really, really quickly and use it. So a really quick drills, just frequent but quick, fast drills are really, really helpful as well.
The next question we have is, what is the best thing as a teacher to read for my teacher knowledge? So we've kind of picked one each. Well, I think there's more than one actually. Probably one of my first books that I ever read was Sally Shaywit's Overcoming Dyslexia, which is a very easy read, but really, really good. So that's probably a great one to recommend for yourselves as teachers, but also to parents. So that would be my pick.
I'm going to say this is free for you, available, and it's something called Read About It, and it's actually available on 5 from 5 website for free. So that's 5 from 5, so it's 5 spelled F-I-V-E, don't use the number 5. So 5from5.org.au, and to go to, there's a booklet on there called Read About It. It's all about the scientific approach to reading, and it will give you what the latest research is, and the good thing is it's not a heavy read. It's a really easy, digestible read, and it breaks it up into the 5 important keys for reading. So that's probably my top tip. Simple enough to read on your holidays.
Mine was 2 really. Mark Seidelberg, Reading at the Speaker's Site, is a really comprehensive book, and it also talks a lot about the teacher training and some of the things that Julie has just touched on as to why, as practitioners, we're taught to teach reading with the 3 cueing system and things like that, and why the evidence-based approaches haven't been supported. It also talks a lot about the cognition, what's actually happening with the brain when teaching reading. And a lighter read than that I found, but I'm not too sure if I found this easy, is I read Mark's book first and then went to Dan Willingham's The Reading Mind. A lot shorter with lots of practical implications for the classroom as well. So that's a really good one as well. And anything by Dan Willingham, he does some YouTube videos and things like that as well. Really makes sense, and a comprehensive look at language from decoding right through to the high level reading comprehension and suggestions around vocabulary building and meaning and structure and background knowledge and all that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, really comprehensive books, good ones to read.
Sorry, Sarah, what's your book? I didn't catch it.
Sally Shaywitz, Overcoming Dyslexia. We've also got on our list that we need to recommend is the National Inquiry into Teaching of Reading. Although it was 2005, it's still very relevant because most of the recommendations haven't, or all of them haven't been put into place. So that's probably a good place to start as teachers as well.
Just with reference to the National Inquiry, the other good reason why all teachers should read it is that it actually points out why our undergrad degrees, and my own was certainly like this. I thought I knew how to teach reading until I crashed into my own son, and he had real reading difficulties, and that made me look a little bit deeper. And then I realised that I wasn't actually given the best instruction myself for how to teach reading. And the National Inquiry into Teaching of Reading in Australia really explained that to me, and I read that document and it was like a complete revelation as to what I've been doing with reading and how I needed to relearn or completely learn some new things about how to tackle reading. The other one, a favourite of mine, is by Stewart and Stainthorpe, and it's called Reading Development and Teaching. And it's really quite simple. It's not a thick book, it's not very dense, it's very reader friendly, and it's got all the good evidence-based information in there for how to teach. It gives some nice practical reasons for why you need to do what you do. So that's another favourite of mine. So it's called Reading Development and Teaching. Okay, and I will do the next question. So we've got another question that says, I'm the only person in school battling to make change. What's the best way to get the whole school on board? Well, that's a big story. I'm going to hand that to the expert, who we all want to clone, of course.
Results speak very, very highly. So if you are that lone wolf teaching synthetic phonics or explicitly in the cupboard or wherever you can get away to do that, using a small group and showing the results that you get. I hear a lot of stories. I hear a lot of... Sarah definitely changed my mind. I had no idea about a lot of the reading instruction and things like that. And speaking to Sarah, and we trialled a group, a small group in the prep area, and then expanded that out. And that worked, and I've heard a lot of success stories from whether they're integration staff or reading intervention people that have started a small group, and the results speak for themselves. And then teachers are very, very inquisitive a lot of the time. They want more of that, and then you can sort of slowly build some momentum and things like that. And basically, it is a long and hard process. If you haven't got leadership on board with you, it's extremely hard. And so look after yourself too, and ensure that you keep connecting to people like this and sharing your stories and talking to anyone who will listen. And I'm more than happy to talk to the principals or anything like that, if you do get them to listen or to mention, to shoot us an email, and we try to fit as many as we can in to talk and send a message about evidence-based practice that's really taking it out of the realm of dyslexia, because unfortunately students with the disabilities are the ones that are copied in the neck the most, but it is the actual way of teaching reading. It's evidence-based, it's good for all, it doesn't harm anyone. And I get a lot of questions sometimes about saying, oh, what about the kids that are already reading? I said, can they spell? Do they have the explicit knowledge of their own language? Can they tell you why cat starts with C and kitten starts with K? And, you know, and is it better that they know that, or is it not better that they know that, even if they could have read in the first place? Debbie Hebbelwhite, I love using her quote, it's their intellectual right to understand how their language works, and it's just important to get that knowledge out there. Try not to beat up too much on the principals and the teachers, because we simply don't know. It's a lot of the tertiary instruction that we get, I think, that needs to change before we can see some real change in Australia and New Zealand and Canada and America and everywhere else. So it's a common problem. But I hope that answers the question. To as many of us getting the message out that we can and showing our results, it soon can't be argued with, I'm sure.
I might just add to that you can't change the world overnight, so start small, and that's exactly what we did. We started in the foundation grades and started to change the things there, and they're the cohort that we're tracking that this year hit NAPLAN. You can't change it overnight, the whole school. It takes time, and we weren't at a place with certain things like running records to take those away until this last year. It takes time, which is frustrating, but if you're a teacher and you are on your own, keep going, because you'll get there eventually, and you'll get someone hopefully that will listen. That was the last question we had, but I'm going to head out to the floor and get some questions from you guys.
Where's she going?
Hi, Steve, probably, and Sarah. So can you take us through some of that journey of departing from the 3 queuing system and moving away from running records?
Yeah, sure. This is going to be hard, Sarah. Well, the first part was building the teacher knowledge around some of the synthetic phonics teaching, and it's all not just about phonics, as we know, about a lot of the areas of reading that we need to target, vocabulary, fluency, and looking at our assessment processes and saying, if we know that the Big 5 or the Big 6 with oral language are the best measures of putting these things together to measure reading, are our assessments reflecting that? And the 3 queuing system simply wasn't giving us enough information. So they were long, they were arduous, and the teachers ended up coming to us saying, we don't feel like we're getting enough out of the running records anymore. In the background, we knew Sarah and a lot of us were scrambling to find other evidence-based approaches which are actually quite free. So we use Diables a lot, which is free online. You can do it, very Americanised, but it works, and they're quick, easy checks. We also implemented probably one of the reasons why I was selected on that reading panel is we used the UK Phonics Check as an area in the phonics area of reading to get a quick screener that told us what we were doing and whether we were doing it well. And the teachers found that gave us a lot more useful information than a running record. So we could see, I think it was 65% in our first year passed that phonics check, yet all of us would have thought we were doing a good job with our phonics. So we knew that we needed more training, and we knew that we needed to get better. And then the journey was really supporting the teachers, because we were building our knowledge base, but explicit instruction was another thing that we found we didn't really understand that well. We all thought we were teaching explicitly, but to become very good at that and to follow a consistent model also took time. So our teachers were trying to build content knowledge and change their teaching practice at the same time. They were suffering cognitive overload, not just with our children. So being very supportive around that, even to this day, that we're not going to be good at it from the start. We will accept some failures. We know that, but we're in this together, and we're all trying to do the same thing. So we needed to replace running records with the Diables assessments and other short screening type assessments. So we didn't take those running records away until we could replace it with something else. Yeah, because the teachers wanted to hear their kids read, and some people were still very reluctant to give away the running records because they understood that. So I encouraged them to look at their Diables results. By all means, do a couple of running records and see how it translates so you can feel confident that the new way of assessing is superior to the old way. Yeah. Whether you're getting... Exactly right, exactly right. And obviously the people that have been doing running records for longer would take a lot longer to transition away from that. So just acknowledging that and letting people go through their change process and pushing where you can push, but also being supportive. Yeah, that's right.
And do you use decodable readers or do you...
We're completely decodable readers now. Yes, it's completely.
That was also transition.
And that's where you're going to need leadership support because that costs a fair bit of money. Yeah.
So yeah, all of the students in Foundation and 1 take home decodables. We use the Oxford Floppy Phonics as take home, plus the Little Learners. And then in class we use the Dandelions, and then with the older grades they continue with things like the Talisman, the Magic Belt, the Alba. We've got pretty much all of them that are out there. The phonics bugs have just arrived in Australia too, which are fantastic. So if you're looking for new readers, they've just come out, they're now available in Australia, which is awesome. Phonic bugs by Pearson. So they're really worthwhile. The free downloadable ones from Spell, South Australia, also great if you're struggling with budgets, because in our first year alone it cost $18,000 to purchase books for the prep grades. So it was an expensive ordeal, but it had to happen because we weren't matching what was going home with what was happening in school. And that wasn't going to, and I've heard of schools that will do a couple of decodables and a couple of level read. That's not going to work. That's not good intervention, and that's not going to be a proactive way to move forward. So yeah, definitely. But if you haven't got a budget, use the Spell South Australia site. There's about 200 on there. They're absolutely fantastic. So good that you've got to print them off or use it online, but that's a great start if you haven't got budget.
And Florida Research
Yes.
Centre for Reading has got a big area of decodable readers. They're not perfectly decodable, but they're not too bad.
Yeah, the Florida Centre for Effective Reading, for reading research, is a great resource to go to as well. There's a lot of games, decodables, all sorts of stuff on there, which is fantastic. It's a great place to go to. A lot of teaching resources. Do we have another question?
What sort of training did your teachers have? What did you put them through?
What training did our teachers have? Well, many years ago, I'd already done quite a few courses on dyslexia and things in the UK because I taught learning support in Singapore for a while. So I'd done a lot of additional training. I then stumbled across the MSL training, which I also did, plus I've studied the Dyslexia Action in the UK, which was my original training. So I've done quite a lot of different courses, and I've just completed the Letters training as well, which is Louisa Motes' training as of last week. So we started on the MSL journey and then realised that gave us a lot of the knowledge, and we deliver that through explicit direct instruction. So we actually got Lorraine Hammond to come and train our whole staff on EDI, which is not just explicit teaching. Explicit direct instruction is actually a model that is not explicit teaching. So you need to read the text and be trained up in how you do EDI effectively. So explicit direct instruction we had an awful lot of training on, and then we actually also brought out Ron Yoshimoto for the whole staff from Hawaii, from the States, to train them all in morphology. So the whole staff are getting that same input, and we've done the same thing this October. We're bringing someone from the States to again train our whole staff. So that's kind of where we're looking at whole school model to make sure everybody has the training. Currently, the MSL training is about one person at each year level to inform, and then the intervention team obviously, to inform them.
And a lot of practical staff, we don't really have staff meetings anymore to talk about administrative things and things like that. We will model. So an example of that recently is we're looking at the numeracy side of things with a lot of, is there a phonics of numeracy? We're sort of looking at with number sense and things like that. So a lot of our guys have been trained in how to deliver the Singapore bar method in that. So our teachers will get up and model to each other how to do that with different questions and things like that. So we try and use our PD, it's whole school, and it should be able to be used in the classroom. It needs to have an impact tomorrow in the classroom, so building skills rather than just looking at theory and things like that.
I might just add to that, because at the beginning of the journey, it was very much, let's go to intervention and say, we'll fix them. Well, that's never going to work unless it's mirrored in the classroom. So we needed to see what was happening in intervention being expanded in the classroom. So it's just like when they see a tutor, that it's not reinforced in school. We needed to see that happening, and with our outside providers like our Speechies and people like that, we work really closely with them here. In fact, our Speechie and our OT are both here today, our private ones, which is great. So we work really closely with those guys, sharing IOPs and targets and things like that as well, so everybody's on the same page, which is great. Another question? Oh, I love that question. How do you fund this? We are a government school.
A lot of it is around prioritising things, so not to knock, I suppose everyone, all schools go down their different paths, but so I really prioritise the decodable readers, I really prioritise the training that we need to do. I want it to be so things like, for example, we were going down the international baccalaureate path. I made a hard decision to cut that because it was just too much money and it didn't seem to be flowing in the same direction as the evidence-based instruction that we wanted to go down, so I made a hard decision there. There were things like staff conferences that we used to do and things like that, so I'd cut there. There was other things that you might spend money on, so rather than investing in PM readers and things like that, we invested in decodables, and it's just making hard decisions around that. But when the vision of the school and there's a certain approach that you're following, those decisions become a little bit easier. Staffing, so for instance, the first few years we may have carried higher class numbers for a little while to cut down on the teachers so we could put more funding into that training budget. Now that we have got more training, we can now alleviate that and maybe go smaller class sizes and things like that. So it's just being clever with where you're spending your money, where you're choosing to spend your money. So my argument for the lower class sizes were, are we better off investing and getting a better qualified teacher trained, or for the effect size, or so it might mean we carry 25 rather than 22, or would 22 give us the results we wanted? So we're very transparent and open with that. So there are ways that you can do it, but yeah, funding is we always want more, don't we? But, the equity funding coming from the government in lower, so we get no extra equity funding because we're a high socioeconomic school, but lower socioeconomic schools, again, it's where you choose to spend that funding. There is a fair bit around, and if you can siphon that off into the right direction, you have a bigger impact for your money.
And I'll just add to that when we brought these people out from the States, that was another way that we managed to cover their things like their flight costs, obviously. We open up trainings to external local schools, and that's what we'll be doing in October when we bring this next professional out, so that she trains our staff on the Friday and Wednesday, Thursday to Monday. It's actually open for other professionals to come and have training. So that covers costs to bring out these really high calibre people. So it's just being a bit smart about things like that. Another question? We got another?
If you're a parent in a school and you've got a situation where you know there's your child, you're not an educator, per se, I can be a parent, of course, but if you know your child is not, something's not right, how do you, and this might have been covered yesterday in the advocacy day, but just from the, I was a teacher, I've retired, but just to reaffirm for teachers how parents, the frustrations that parents can have, and you want to try to get that across in the school or to your teacher, your child's teacher.
I'll start that and then I'll hand to Julie, who's been through the journey and is at the high school level. I think, again, we need to listen to those parents because they're pretty well informed. So a lot of the parents have done training themselves or have got that knowledge, and they know instinctively that something's not right. And so we don't want to wait for what we call the Matthew effect and go, they'll get there. That's not okay, because they won't. The research is showing that self-esteem is damaged by grade 1, which is pretty heartbreaking. And the research also shows that if they get to grade 3 and they're not there, there's a 75% chance they won't get there. That's what we're not going to give up an intervention, but we need to intervene early. So if that parent starts foundational prep and they say that there's red flags with rhyming, they're struggling with this, that and the other, listen to them, because often, especially with things like social media now and Twitter and research out there, they would have read a lot of that research and listen to them, because they might actually know probably more than us about some of these things. I'll pass to Julie.
Well, I've had an interesting experience, but what I'll say not to say to parents is don't tell them it's because they haven't read enough. I read enough till my son's ears bled, I'm sure. So I had that one thrown at me, and I'm a teacher, so I've seen this from both sides of the fence and I get it. But certainly don't tell me it's not because I read enough. And I was also told by a principal that I was a helicopter parent and I needed to stand back and let him learn. So please don't do that. from a parent's perspective, don't do that. Yes, listening to the parents is absolutely, I think, I wish the professionals had listened to me when my son was 4. We'd be in a very different position now. And then by the time he was 15, they came up with a diagnosis and went, oh, okay. But I knew that when he was 4. So please listen to those parents and don't fob them off. Really listen and then delve into what you think the problem is, might be with the child. And do things like encourage parents, if your school can't offer it, to go and get some screening, to go and get some help. One thing, don't send them in direction, please, which I was sent in this direction, is Irlen lenses, coloured paper, behavioural optometry. I've done diet. I was going through the whole list in my head last time of all the things that we've done, and we wasted a ton. I'm going to get to that. Yep. I wasted a ton of money. I think I could have had my mortgage paid off by now. The other thing we did, most importantly, is that I wasted time. Very valuable time. So my son didn't get the help that he needed until about year 4. And so we know when we get to year 4, we're going to have to do a lot more work if we had got to that in prep. And I actually had a very good speech pathologist who was helping my son, who actually said he's a great candidate for literacy difficulties because he has a phonological speech disorder. We told that to the school principal and they didn't listen to the speech therapist, which was really interesting too. So our journey has been very, I don't know how to explain it, but it's been very up and down, and we have had successes. The best thing we did was in year 4, when he did get his dyslexia diagnosis, going through the MSL stuff, teaching explicit, systematic phonics was the best thing for him. And so that has worked. He's still a slow reader, and he probably always will be because he has what we call rapid automatic naming difficulties in his profile. But had we got to him at kindy, I think we still could have had a slightly better outcome than what he is now. But we now know some other ways of getting around that, so it's not all doom and gloom. There are lots more things we can do. But his confidence certainly blossomed when he had his dyslexia diagnosis and he walked a few feet taller. So Pam Snow's book is what was, you've been reminded of that. Pam Snow and Carolyn Bowen have written a great book called Making Sense of Interventions.
Heidi's holding it up.
Heidi's holding it up at the back. That is the best thing. Do yourself a favour, make sure you read that book because, the whole range, I've tried it. I've just about tried them all. I think there's probably a few I haven't tried, but now I know I'm not even going to bother. So, yeah, make sure you know where you're sending parents and send them in the right direction. Yes.
And as teachers, get a great screening tool and screen them. So we screen all our prep students before they start school. I already have a spreadsheet of the 100 kids about to start in 2 weeks' time. I know who needs support now, so I'm going to pull those kids in for intervention straight away. I'm not going to wait because we know that we don't want to wait because 8 is too late, is one of Tanya Forbes' sayings. We need to get in straight away. So we've already profiled those students because there's a difference between profile and diagnosis. So profiling them is to identify where the gaps are so you can teach those gaps as soon as possible. Some students, as Julie said, the diagnosis helps, but for many of us it's a costly process that doesn't actually then move us forward. So we need to identify those gaps as soon as possible in decoding, in spelling, in phonemes, in irregular memory words, in all of it, and then move forward. And you don't need to pay exorbitant amount for that. So one of the tools that you can use if you don't know of it is the MOTIF testing, M-O-T-I-F. MOTIF is great because there's a whole, I think there's 12 different assessments on there that are free from Macquarie University. So you just register. There's some really good assessment tools to use. There's also some on Alison Clark's website. She's got a irregular non-word spelling test that is available. That is great. MOTIF have one of those too. So there are tools out there that you can access, but find a phonemic awareness screener or get your school to purchase one. So we use the C part for our new kids before they began school. S-E-A-P-A-R-T. That's by Ros Nilsson, who also does the SPAT-R, but it's her early one. That's what we used with the kids before they came in. Yes, it was time-consuming to screen 100 students, but well worth it. And alongside that, we also got the parents to complete a questionnaire of have you ever had learning difficulties? Has anyone repeated a grade? Does anyone struggle at school? Has the student had speech or language or OT? All of these things, we actually got to one student who's now seeing the private speechy before they even began. So we're getting in with things like that far earlier and working with the kinders, and we're trying to educate the kinder teachers too with things like that. So that's really well worth it. If you're not sure, you can email me and I'll give you some more advice on the screeners and things that we use, because you don't want to wait, and then it's really hard in the older grades to fill those gaps. Really, really hard. Yes, you've been waiting really patiently with your hand.
While being very sympathetic to the parent's perspective with things like this, and I'm a parent of a child who's just also been diagnosed with what was called mild dyslexia, but as a teacher I've got 2 students currently who have specific learning difficulties and the parents don't want to know about it. So have you got some advice for trying to explain to parents? And I've used some of the resources, I think it's from Spell, the booklet for parents with the lots of details in it, but that might be too much. But 2 parents who, their kids are in year 3 and 4 now, so I know the boat's floated to a certain extent.
So there's some great, really supportive Facebook groups I would encourage them to join. So I would encourage them to join Dyslexia Victoria Support. There's about 2,500 members, and there's lots of events that they can come to and information nights. That's one thing. I would also encourage them to look at the Ausspelled guide, because that's free. If you haven't given it to them, there's a free teacher one and a parent one. So if they haven't looked at the Ausspelled guide, I would also encourage them to look at that one too. And again, I would be saying to them that, yes, if they've got a diagnosis, wonderful, and if your department's speechy or psych's got to them, great, but if not, let's find those gaps and move them forward and explain it in that way with an individual learning plan, specific targets.
I'd just like to add on that we're very careful of teachers that are not overstepping. We might suspect things like that, but so my advice is always go from the educational point of view and always house your concerns from the educational point of view where you are qualified to talk about, and you may lead the discussion down that path of where to maybe get some further help with that. So I've seen Sarah do it very well. Yes, the handwriting might be a bit, we want to improve handwriting and fine motor skill control. We can do this here, this is what we'll do for your child. If you've thought about OT or something like that, that may also help if you want to, here's an so you can go through that. So obviously always come from that, because we can sometimes, I think, offend parent, and that's a really tricky line to walk, isn't it, when you're trying to lead a parent to do further exploration on something they don't want to know about.
And sometimes it takes time as well, because I've had conversations with parents and they haven't wanted to take it on board, and then we've had to have the conversation again, and you feel a bit like, as a teacher, you're on this carousel going around that you're having the same conversation with certain parents, and then eventually they might get there. But it's just giving them that information of the early identification, early intervention, and the importance of that, and empowering them with knowledge, if you can. Do you have a question?
Mine, it's not so much a question. Do you think we really need to raise awareness about the fact that the ability to read, write and spell is unrelated to intelligence? Because quite often I find out that parents don't want to address it because they're embarrassed and they're ashamed, and maybe they're hiding something from their own school days or whatever. And so through schoolyard conversations you find out they're having this remediation, but they don't want to talk about it with anyone else. And so is that something that's happening with Code Read?
Yeah, definitely. Code Red, which is the Code Red repronounced read, are definitely working on some of those things, and trying to raise awareness and identification and understanding of what dyslexia is. That's also what I would say is, with regard to parents, I'm not going to steal the thunder of the sites that are coming after me, but they're going to talk about VCE and the fact you don't need in Victoria now an IQ assessment. So they'll talk about that at the end of today, so I'm not going to steal their thunder, but because I saw it yesterday. And so things have changed a bit in Victoria, which is awesome. So we'll get to that. So I think things like that are changing, and the fact it's not related to IQ. Yes. Just one over here.
I don't have to run far.
I'm pretty new to all this. In the classroom, if you suspect a child has dyslexia, what's the normal, and you go and speak to the principal, what would be the normal pathway in the school to have them, or to check their diagnosis, or where from?
I'm north of the border, so you need to have this answered by the people who live in this state.
Are you in a government school or Catholic school or Catholic? So again, I might not know the systems you have. Do you have a school speechy that works in school?
Yes.
Yeah, because the department schools have that too. So generally they've got great knowledge. So I know one of the educators here is doing her masters in speech, and the module she's doing, teachers should train with the speechies. That would be wonderful. I would speak to them as a first port of call. But again, sometimes I don't know what it's like in Catholic, but in the government system that can take too long for our school speech or our site to get to them. And so that's a too long process. And again, some parents can't afford to go out and spend the money to be identified and to find those gaps. So I was thinking, do you have someone in charge of learning support, or like my role at your school, that would have some of that knowledge? Or
Yeah, a little bit, not permanently though, I would say.
and if not, I'd start getting yourself empowered with some of the screening tools where you can find those gaps, to start filling in those gaps with their individual learning plan as soon as you can, while you're waiting for the external services, because sometimes it certainly can take too long for the psychs or speeches to get to them. The department system, I don't know if the same in Catholic, but it certainly is in the department system. And we don't want to wait for that. We want to intervene straight away. But again, the right intervention. Because to get a diagnosis, you have to have had 6 months intervention. But that's got to be good intervention. It's got to be evidence-based, excellent intervention. Does that help?
Yes, very much.
And again, you need those processes in place really clearly, which they weren't at our school at the beginning. They are now. You need really clear protocols and processes of who they go to, what they fill in when they are worried about something, where you head. So often our department speech team will say, right, if it's just a common articulation issue, we'll go because she won't get to them until grade 2 or 3. So if it's something small like that and the parents can afford it, they can do that. They don't have to, obviously. However, the ones that get to our speechy now are big issues, because otherwise we've dealt with them. I mean, the school nurse came in term 4 and she said, I haven't picked up anything with the prep kids. I would hope not, otherwise we're doing a really bad job. So yes, identifying those things early as a teacher as well. And then just empowering your whole staff with what to look for, what are the key indicators, what should you be looking out for.
The response to intervention model is a really good one to look at, and it's an empowering one to see how important that mainstream instruction that Sarah and I are talking about is. It should match up. So it's comforting to know that it might be dyslexia, it might be this, it might be that, but at the end of the day the child can't read. So our education responses are the clear, explicit teaching of phonics or phonemic awareness or whatever it is that the children might need. From an educator point of view, it's kind of like, well, what can I control? If I can't control these sorts of things, these are the things I can do, and doing it for all children is going to be fine as well. And then any intervention, hopefully, is more of the same. So now when our children go to Sarah and things like that, it's either a pre-teaching or a post-teaching. It's more of the same, it's not something different. So really looking at that response to intervention model, getting knowledgeable about that and talking to your school leaders and things about that is also really important.
So now it's actually quite vital that I don't pull them out of literacy, because the instruction that's happening in the classroom is really, really good. Obviously that's not always possible. And then what I'm finding now with some of the new students coming in, I'm about to group 4 or 5 of the grade 2s for intensive 2 hours a day, because they're that far behind our students for the first term, because we've got to catch them up. It's just too hard. They can't slot straight into the classroom. So we're going to give some intensive work with those guys this term. So it's all looking at that response. And the kids can be, some students will have intervention from prep to 6. Some will move from tier 2 to tier 3, from individual instruction to a small group, and will move between those tiers. They're not stuck there for 20 weeks or 10 weeks, or they move around.
A common thing with waiting for, and I've done it myself as a teacher, I'm ashamed of, because I just had no knowledge, and it's hard. When I look back now and think, you kind of think, oh, this child, something's not right, you kind of just stop until I know what's wrong. But what I learned, well, even when I did get that report back, I didn't know what to do anyway. So, I could read the recommendations, but I had no knowledge to help anyway. So what I'm sort of advocating is, if you know it's a reading issue, try. Child's getting nothing at the moment. Try the explicit approaches or something like that, yeah.
Also something to keep in mind is that dyslexia is not a one-size-fits-all label, and neither are reading issues. There are many different moving parts that contribute to the ability to read and write effectively, and a child can have a deficit or a strength in any one of those. And so you may have many children who have been diagnosed with dyslexia, or many children with reading difficulties. They're having difficulties in different things, so they will have slightly different profiles. So reading as much as you can about that. Marianne Wolf is a good one for reading on that. She will talk about typically 3 types, but there are more than that. The most common types being the phonological issues. You've got rapid automatic naming issues, and you can have some children with both of those, which is the double deficit. But there are more profiles than that, but they're 3 basic ones to understand, and then you can go on and learn about more from those.
one that was really helpful for our staff and myself, that gives you a framework, is The Simple View of Reading by Goff and Tumner. If you can have a look at that. Simple in terms of the equation that was put together, that reading comprehension is equal to your language comprehension multiplied by your decoding ability. And once you unpack those areas, the cognitive framework of learning how to read and all that sort of stuff also unpack those areas. You understanding the reading process more and more will also help you identify where those deficits might be, simply by boosting your own knowledge. So understanding how the language comprehension interplays with your decoding ability really helps as well.
And the important thing to remember about that is if you're trying to apply remediation for a child, you can't necessarily take a boxed program and apply it to that child. Because if they've got rapid automatic naming difficulties, putting on phonological processes and building that won't necessarily help them terribly much. So it's making sure that you don't try and take something and just fit it. You know, it's not going to work. If you're really having difficulties and they're still struggling, if you have done that and they're still struggling, then you need to look a little bit deeper into that child's individual profile and find out what it is that's stopping them from progressing.
So do you think there's a move now to not take the children out of the classroom for intervention?
Well, I guess it depends on the school, and it also depends on the knowledge that the school has as well. I mean, ideally, I know children don't like to be taken out, and if you're a high school student, you don't want to be taken out. You don't want to appear different. And I think a very famous example of that is Jamie Oliver talks about the fact that they used to knock on the door and say, let's take Jamie Oliver, we're going down the hallway, and he always knew what he was going for, and everyone else knew what he was going for. And so he felt really dumb about that. So high school students in particular, if there's any high school teachers here, just be mindful of that. They really don't want to appear different, and so taking them out is not necessarily a good thing.
I will add to that though, that we stopped our grade 6 intervention term 4 because term 4 gets crazy with graduation and everything else. And we had the grade 6 kids coming up to the intervention team in the yard saying, when are you coming to get me? And one of them actually said she was so distressed that her support had ceased towards the end that she wanted to, so we had to start it again because she was actually upset that she wasn't, because they feel so much success. It's like the kids on the camp here this week. They get so much success and it's done in a fun way. I mean, I was playing Twister here this morning with floss words and things for the kids. Like it's done in such a fun way that they feel the other kids want to come. So it's about school culture as well, building that culture of the school. So, and we've got so many different professionals and individuals and people going in and out for different things, from advanced maths to this to that. To, it's not seen as like that.
Definitely how you set it up within the school. Any other questions? This time.
Hi, I'm teaching currently in the TAFE sector. Have done primary and secondary years gone by. Part of the literacy stuff that we teach our teachers' aides is what is represented within the community, which is not very good, reading recovery and stuff like that. And I'm not up for that. Obviously we've got a couple of kids that are dyslexic, but how do I turn that circle so that I can have suitably trained and at least aware teachers' aides to put into those schools, because when they get in the schools, they're actually not supported if I suggest and give them ideas in relation to MSL or explicit training, things like that, because that's not what the schools in our area are doing, and it's very much an ethos of it's worked really well so far, which it hasn't, we'll just keep doing that.
Yeah, so you're teaching the course? Yes, that's what I do in my other job. Yes, that is really difficult, and I'm living and breathing that dream as we speak, in that I'm going to train the teachers' aides, and they're going out into the school, and exactly that, it's not happening. It's really tricky. I think you need your teachers' aides to know that if they go in there like a bull at a gate, it's not going to be very effective. And again, it depends on school culture. Some schools, I send my SLSOs, my teachers' aides out there, and they're like, yes, we're like sponges, give us all you got, and they're really interested, and they link into a lot of the resources that I've given them. But then you do get some schools that are absolutely no, it's a closed a closed book, they're not willing. And sometimes, I guess, you made a comment about teaching phonics in the broom cupboard. Sometimes they go do that, and they go, you know, they know how to, and a lot of these are listening to children read, and going back to what I was saying before about how you, you know, listen to children read and how you correct the mistakes. And they do that. It is really difficult when you're in a teacher's aide position, and again, Steve might have something to say about that, but, you know, we're also teaching aid, yeah. So we're coming, I mean, you've got great leadership and you probably have a different perspective on that, but it's tricky and it's delicate, and you just need to make sure your students, your teachers are aware that they are going into that, and it's not going to be, you know, new approaches are not always going to be welcomed with open arms. So it's learning politics, I suppose, understanding the landscape as to why people don't want to make change, and just being careful and sensitive, and trying to resource teachers if they want it, you know, point them in the direction of good stuff that you're no doubt showing them. I'm trying, I know, it's hard.
I don't think I've got anything more to add to that. I think that's what my advice would be is, what are the most likely things you're going to come up with as an integration aid? And with literacy and numeracy difficulties, these are some of the things that you can try if you do get any one-on-one moments with your children and things like that. Have these in your back pocket to apply when you can. It's just about trying to get that education out there as much as possible.
Hi, my name is Carmel. I work at a somewhat far from you in Maroon, and my role is doing support, student services. And I think it's really important to remember, like sitting here as a teacher, and I know that Roy's sitting next to me, she's my prep teacher at junior school, that you've got to be careful the way it's really hard as a teacher that's been doing it one way, because that's how we've all been trained. Not to feel so bad, I suppose, because we spent a lot of money a few years ago on LLI, which, you know, works for some kids, doesn't work for others. It depends on what the purpose is. So we found that with some of our juniors hasn't worked so well, so now we're trying other things with the synthetic phonics and getting good results. But, you know, for some of the older kids who can read really well but don't have comprehension, that's a really good program. So, you know, don't think just what you've been doing hasn't worked, because it's worked for some children, and it's about choosing the right intervention for the right children and learning.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like, you know the bit on Goodwill Hunting when he says it's not your fault? He goes, yeah, I know. It's not going to find any burst into tears. It feels a bit like that as a teacher sometimes. Of course, we always go out with the best intentions, and I suppose what we're advocating is the more you build your knowledge about that, and don't just assume that you get that from university, because in our experience, we aren't getting it. And the more that you build your knowledge, the better you understand what did work in the past. So a lot of the whole language approaches and things you look at that, if you look at the language comprehension side of the simple view of reading, you go, okay, I can see why some of the things worked there. I can see where, you know, but our decoding knowledge, though, was the area at my particular school in our instance where we had no idea whatsoever how deep that synthetic phonics goes, and about decoding and encoding and fixing spelling as well as reading, or fixing, but teaching spelling and reading at the same time. And that's all I'd advocate. And yeah, we've all got the best intentions as teachers, and they're so courageous. Every person here today that goes back and takes any change, so courageous and well done. And it's hard not to reflect on our careers and feel like that we're getting beaten up and we've done the wrong things and all that sort of stuff. And we haven't. Our intention's always really good, and we just need to try and improve as much as we can. I'm the first one to admit I knew nothing probably about reading instructions to the level I do now, but once we do know, we try and learn as much as we can.
I'll just add to that certainly going in, if you've got a resistant teacher and saying, look, I didn't know this, I've just found out that this is the case with this is why we're doing this, and trying to educate them that way. Again, talking about comprehension, a really good thing to look at is Daniel Williams' Teaching Reading is Content. Teaching Reading is Knowledge, Daniel Willingham. He does a really good little 10-minute YouTube clip, and what it talks about is the background knowledge for comprehension, and why students in the States, with their equivalent of NAPLAN, if they didn't pass because it was about Spaceball, it wasn't because they couldn't answer the comprehension questions, it's because they had no background knowledge or vocabulary. So students in grade 3 up should be learning 6 to 8 new vocabulary words a day, and which is what yesterday I was teaching some of my kids here the words like gargantuan and famished and words like this. And I said, go home and tell your parents that you're famished at dinner time, because they've then got to use them to get them in their long-term memory. So it's all about, comprehension is all about, once they've got the decoding, it's actually about teaching them the content, the vocabulary, the background knowledge. We've got to teach that too, because they won't just get that. There's actually research to show about comprehension strategies. People go and spend a long time teaching, let's pick the main idea. They actually don't need that much time on that. They need the background knowledge and the vocabulary. We spend way too long as teachers teaching that. I didn't know this not so long ago. So again, it's just empowering our knowledge.
Starting small. Just start, you know, we're so busy as teachers dealing with everything all the time, and acknowledging that with our guys, you know, when you're trying to build your content knowledge and change to a more explicit approach at the same time, it is exhausting. So I found the planning meetings, when you used to be able to just go and organise all the activities and things, having deep discussions about how do we introduce it. Is this right? Sarah, can you come in? It was taking up all their planning time, and the guys are going back feeling like they're not organised and all this sort of stuff. So you've just got to acknowledge that and support that how hard it really is. And I just have my hats are off to anyone that goes down that change journey.
I'll just add to that, we've changed the structure of the literacy block too, so it's no longer an hour of reading, hour of writing, or 2 hours of literacy, because that's not how we need to teach literacy. What we actually need to do now is we actually need to explicitly teach 10-15 minutes of handwriting, 10-15 minutes of vocabulary, 20 minutes of comprehension, 30 minutes of writing, so our 10 minutes of phonics. So the day starts with everybody across the school teaching phonemic awareness, phonics, or morphology. So Steve can walk around, and that's what should be happening on the timetable, and you can see that that's happening. So it's almost like little blocks, which also means you don't have the behaviours because the kids are very engaged. Explicit direct instruction is quite quick-paced, so the kids are engaged as well. But the block's very different, just as maths is. So the maths block's exactly the same. You've got 5-10 minutes of times tables. So my grade 3 daughter knew about 3 at the beginning of this year. She now knows them all off bat. She doesn't have any difficulties. But it's changing that block, so it's mental maths. Then they've got there, we actually use Spelling Mastery as a direct instruction program in school as well. So that's done daily at a certain time. So it's changing the literacy block, which has been a really big, hard shift for some of our teachers.
You've got to see it.
Some of the teachers have found that really difficult to move away from. We've probably got time maybe for one more. Penny, how quick they are?
As a parent of a few children with learning difficulties, starting to see, had my 4, I think it is going to be the 4 with dyslexia, it's starting to look more and more like that, but to a diagnosed, is just on the parental point of view, is also how to get your parents on board too. If you've got that nice friendly face who comes up at the beginning of the day or the end of the day and wants to have a chat with you and who wants to support you in the classroom, I think that is just so empowering. I mean, I think that it's not just the staff who work in school, but I think it's great to have the parents on board who are going to support you in the classroom, who understands your challenges, your day-to-day challenges. You know, sometimes I'll say to teachers, I don't know how you do it, I think you're doing a great job. So it's just great to, I think that's just really, you know, building up that community in the school and supporting one another, even though it is hard for me sometimes to approach certain teachers. That I just find, anyway, that's a whole other story. But yeah, just encourage, you know, take it from the parents too, you know, let them pat you on the back too, because you're all doing a great job.
One last one at all?
Hi, I'm actually from Queensland and have a background in teaching, but also 20 years in public relations and changing behaviour. So, just on the work that I've been listening to Steve and Sarah outline at their school, what I'd like to talk about is not the dyslexic children, but all the other children in Australia who can read. We should be doing a lot better, right? The whole cohort needs to go up. If we were teaching in this way, we would provide the brightest and the best with what they deserve, which is deep lexical understanding of English. They're ready for it. We haven't been trained in it, and they're not getting it. Now, the schools around the world that are beating us, some of whom aren't and have been for decades. So across international league tables, our top kids stay the same. We're pretty static. The middle is oozing back to that way. There's a big chunk of that middle. They're not dyslexic. It's an instructional thing. Some of it's, they're in classes where there are major behaviour issues. They want to learn, they can't. So changing this way of teaching, this explicit, systematic thing, will improve it for everyone. Don't just think it's an intervention for that end. It's something that will just move the whole way forward.
Thank you, that's exactly right. We call that instructional casuals of this teacher. Which is really important to me. We're going to stop there because I really don't want to run over into these guys' time because there's some really new important knowledge about particularly the VCE, but it comes right down to primary level.